Today's guest is a two-time national champion coach at his alma mater, just hanging banners at Mesa Arena. He makes up for his personal success with the failures of his favorite pro sports teams. But first, today's episode is brought to you by DMI Entertainment. Check their Facebook page for Zoom parties on the weekends, making sure we're all having a good time during social distancing. They can't wait to get back to Dakota Lounge, the O, and other spots around North Dakota and Minnesota, but for now, they've got their music video sets going online. DMI Entertainment for all your sound, lighting, and DJ needs for your club, bar, wedding, or large event. Joined by Minot State national champion hockey coach Wade Regier. No introduction. He's already red in the face from it, but what are you going to do? Wade, you guys are coming off the national championship in 2018 to 2019, man. How did you get it done from last year?
You know what? It's pretty crazy, it's because especially with our program and we had a couple back-to-back years back in 2017, 2018, and the previous year where we were went for it. We were the number one team in the country. We were loaded with seniors and couldn't get it done. We lost in the Final Four semifinal back-to-back years. So then preceding that was a rebuilding year. The 2018, 2019 was, if you want to call it, a rebuilding year. We had brought in upwards of 12, freshmen, and we were going to say, hey, this was going to be a young group. And, kind of as the season rolled along, boy, we caught fire, and lo and behold, at the national tournament being a one and done, and so many things have to go your way. We got a couple breaks in the national quarterfinal, and we felt like if we get past the number one team, Adrian College, who knows what could happen. And boy, lo and behold, we're sitting hoisting a national championship. And I tell you, I would, we always like to say we have a chance to win it every year, but I would be lying if I wouldn't say that we were, a little bit more surprised than we were for sure.
You're talking about how you had a lot of younger players, younger recruits coming into that season, and you kind of saw the wave of momentum go as the regular season went on. And I know you're telling the guys before every single national tournament game the best kind of message to get them motivated, but at the same time, maybe as you advanced in the national tournament, and even when you won the whole thing, were you surprised, shocked at all, just gratified from all the experience that this team had, maybe ahead of schedule?
Absolutely, it sure was. We certainly know we have the talent to win it every year. It's just a matter of can we get it done. And the thing about a national tournament is it's just like, you rarely see those one and done type of NCAA basketball teams. Like, the rare time, you get Kentucky to win it, with basically all one and dones. But rarely, when you think about who wins an NCAA basketball tournament, there's usually like a senior or two, a kid that's been with the program that probably isn't going to go to the NBA or isn't going to be some superstar that just absolutely plays out of their world. And that was always been the case for every national tournament that I've ever been. You can look back for the last 10 years that there's always one or two type of players that step up that are typically seniors, that they know it's their last opportunity, that just play out of this world. And, for us, it was our back end. It was Eric Bolifer, who was a fifth-year senior, and his D partner, Kyle Lipinski. And they were very, very good defensemen. And they've been a part of all those teams. But, man, out of this world, they played like 40 minutes a game and didn't even look tired. And you're like, geez, these guys are not types to be absolute, workout freaks. But, man, they played out of this world. They played so sound defensively. And then offensively, they chipped in when they needed it. And that happens every year. And you look back at any sport, specifically in terms of college, there's always just a senior or a junior or somebody that just knows that they rise to the occasion. And that was the thing for us with so many freshmen, that, they're wide eyes and can they handle the adversity of being down in swings. But man, it was awesome to see those guys really step up. And there was a big reason why, we won.
What about just the highlights of the career contributions to the program, just individually and leading you guys to that championship and all the success you've had of guys like Blake Fournier, Dylan Johnson, Alex Bechtold, Kent Walchuk, and Joel Swedlow are the guys that I have on my list, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for those guys, because they were recruited in one of those loaded years. They all came in that 2016, season there where, we were loaded with talent. We were number one team 3 years in a row. And as a matter of fact, with those seniors that are currently, they were all part of one of the smallest recruiting classes that I had ever had. And, that they knew that there was going to be some kind of in and out. You talk about, Dylan Johnson and Kent Walchuk and even Blake Fournier was an MVP. Their first freshman years, in and out of the lineup. You play 40 games in a season, and they maybe only dress 20 games. And, as an individual, that's a very tough thing to do. I mean, especially every player, and as you know, Ben, a lot of guys that come to college were either the best player on their high school team or AAA midget or junior hockey. They come as being the best. I mean, that's the reason why we recruit them. And to go into a scenario where you're not going to be the best guy and you're in and out of the lineup, and part of that is that you can really ruin a locker room. I mean, you talk about the word cancer in a hockey locker room. It's not obviously the disease, but being able to fester and ruin the culture and really kind of affect things can be a big problem. And for those guys that you mentioned, they were what you want in teammates that understand their role, that they know that if they work hard, that sooner or later it's going to come to fruition with all those players. And then when it comes to the national tournament, and then now they become juniors and seniors, and now you see them playing impact roles. And that's the thing that when we doing new recruits, we just had a new recruit signed yesterday. We got another one I think we're going to this afternoon that understand that, hey, I'm coming to a program where I'm expected to be a big part of what's going on, but if in fact it doesn't work out, I know that he's going to keep on working, and sooner or later it's going to pay to fruition. So that's our culture. It's taken a number of years, but I tell you, it's fun part to be a coach of this program right now, because the guys that are coming in understand what we're expected of them, and then the returning players can rely on those, like you just said, Ben, of some of these guys that have been through these things in the last number of years, that hey, we're going to win. We're going to compete for national titles. If it's not your freshman year, you're going to be going forward to sophomore, junior year, and it's just kind of that trickle down effect. And like I said, it's fun. I'll tell you, it's fun having those conversations with recruits right now.
Now, how's the transition like for that? You're the head coach. You go out and recruit these players. Obviously, your pitch needs to work to get them to come here. And like you said, they're some of the best players on their teams right now. But then I don't know if the right word is like get them to break down or fall in line, or maybe just how do you get them to buy in, or maybe kind of get that chip on their shoulder where the egos are checked at the door and it ultimately works. A bunch of guys put together.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ben. I mean, that is a challenge, not only in terms of how we conduct ourselves both on and off the ice, but even just internally, like expecting X amount of minutes in a game or those type of things. It starts early in the recruiting process. This year, you talk about this year being a wild with this whole coronavirus and how we're recruiting. Typically, the recruiting process is usually I'm talking to a player on the phone a number of times, and then when they come for their official visit, usually there's a parent or two that comes along, and then we have those conversations, a couple months later with parents and kind of explaining. Now we're doing it right away. I mean, the recruiting dynamic and how this works is now essentially a phone gets put on speakerphone at a kitchen table, mom and dad and player are firing questions, and it actually I feel like it's changed the game with recruiting a little bit, and I kind of enjoy it a little bit too, because now I'm not answering the same question 7 times. It's being able to go through it. But to backtrack your point, it starts in the recruiting and kind of explaining what we are. But the other side of it comes from our current players. Our leadership group is probably more so important than anything else. One of the things that I did, I should have done it early in my 10-year. Well, we're going to 11th season, but in my 5th year, I believe, is when I remember when I was playing high school football. You'd have your awards banquet, and then the coach would announce the captains for the next season. And he said, I remember Mr. Sargent saying, hey, being a captain is a year-round thing. We're not going to have no captains basically through the summer. Start a couple months and then vote on it and do it there. He's like, leadership is a 365-day thing. And I did that, I think it was year 5. And I think that was a big thing for us, because now once these players commit, I'm basically giving their phone number to our captains and saying, let's start the process right away. So they're already, introducing themselves, communicating, talking, just saying, hey, what's going on? What things do you like to do? So that when they come in the fall, like when everybody comes in there, it's not like you're trying to introduce, 5 new guys or 10 new guys and having to start this culture thing. They understand already in the middle of the summer what is expected of them, and, kind of that familiarity, so that, you get to know each other. You kind of understand, when you talk about egos, like it's a big question, you kind of, you find the background on that. And part of it is you're just learning and knowing each other. Like, hey, what type, we were talking about, music. Well, what kind of music do you like? So we're not, having issues in the locker room if somebody likes to, put heavy metal on or something, like it's just kind of that understanding that goes with it. But it happens. It has to happen organically. And as I've realized, you can't just force it upon guys. And sometimes it takes a little longer than others to identify with it. But I tell you, one of the biggest things that really kind of cleans it up is winning. Winning is a big part of it, and the other side of this is having big crowds. You know, when there's nothing worse than having to be a healthy scratch when we're playing you, Mary, and there's like 2,000 people in the building, and you have to wear a suit, and then people are wondering, are you hurt or what's going on? You want to be in the lineup, so you want to do everything that you possibly can to be in that lineup, and that includes, checking your ego at the door, being good in the classroom and all those types of things. So it's all encompassing, but I'll tell you this, Ben, it has to be organically. You can't just, here's a list of paper and like expect to what we want for our guys. No, you gotta learn how this works. You gotta ask questions from your leadership group, and then basically it goes, from there.
You mentioned a lot where once you recruit guys, you share their information with the captains to get things going. I'm wondering, once they get there, maybe who's been kind of like the glue guy or the locker room clown in recent years, or notable guys that maybe aren't the captains that really help that culture work?
Oh, you're right, absolutely right. I think for us, we're very fortunate. I mean, we really only list 4 captains, but for us, it's usually you have almost 10 to 12 to choose from. And then even if you're not a captain, it's guys that have been captains at their junior teams or playing captains at their high school teams that that are going to be future captains. And yeah, you're right. I mean, we have our, Blake Fournier has always been kind of that, call it the dad in the locker room, and knows when the guy that tells the guys, hey, time to settle down, let's be focused, all that stuff. But there's always a couple guys that go behind the scenes. One of them is Adam Wowrick. I tell you, he is. Let's just say he's an interesting personality. He is very outgoing. He's he's a guy that definitely doesn't. He tells it as it is. Spade is spade. It's just how it is. But he's also kind of a bit of a guy that's loose. He likes to have a little bit of fun. But he's such a passionate being. He's kind of almost like our unofficial recruiter somewhat. And part of it is he's connected to so many of these guys, which is crazy because in junior hockey, you're only playing for 3 years. So it's 20 to 18. And somehow he just is like, he's played out 4 years older than some of these guys. And yet he's like, oh, I played with him when I was in, summer hockey, or I remember going to a camp, or, like a summer school, or, or he was a 17-year-old and he was called up as an affiliate.
We played on the same pond together when we were like 8,
Yeah.
That guy.
It's great. Yeah, he's so crazy how he's connected to everybody. And so that's kind of the other side of that too, that, I mean, when I'm recruiting, it's not just myself and Wyatt. I mean, once the player has been talked to and has had the information, we've had the communication, is then we start to find like who is connected, and we usually identify that earlier. But yeah, I mean, he's been great. I mean, he's also the type too that how recruiting works. Coaches can't talk to players that are on other universities, but God knows he's connected to everybody. It's not hurting him texting a friend and saying, hey, are you enjoying your time at X university? Because I'm having a blast, and so. That's a thing that's a big part of it too. But as you asked earlier, Benny, there's a lot of guys. There's so many players that, like I said, even this recruiting class that we're bringing in, I mean, we talked to 20 players. I bet 18 of them, the coach is like, man, wait, this is your future captain. I'm like, oh, thanks. I mean, we're going to have 18 future captains here, and it's right. And so that's a big part of this because you have to be very selfless. And I know some guys like to wear a letter on their jersey, and but really you need to have other guys step up. And especially this year, geez, I tell you, we had Blake Fournier go down with an injury. He was out for a month and a half, and he was our captain. Connor Navarot's an assistant captain. He tore his labrum and had surgery. His season was over. There was a couple times we went on a road trip. I think it was like Joel Swedlow was the only one that wore a letter. And so I was like, but we had other guys step up, and it was just a natural way of how leadership works.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I mean, remember, this is the very first podcast interview that we're recording, so nobody can get in trouble here yet anyway. We don't have the clout build up, but is there any funny stories from the national tournament, traveling, or like any of the road trips in general that was just hilarious?
Oh man, I mean, there's so many to count. I mean, the thing that for us, which was crazy, was, I mean, even just last year's national tournament, we want to watch some film, right? So we want to be able to set up a video screen in the hotel lobby or whatever. Well, all of a sudden, their conference room's being used at the hotel all the time. So then we're like, where are we going to do this? Well, then Wyatt and I are like, let's just do it in our room. So we basically had to make our hotel room into a video room. split the boys up into 2 groups, and we'd have different guys going through or whatever. So that was, you'd have guys in the hallway, and you didn't want to put 40 guys in a room or whatever it goes with it. But with us, there's been so many times, I bet, where either the bus is broken down, and we're like, thinking, oh man, we're going to be like Lord of the Flies, on this bus, or when are we going to get out of here? And, those types of things happen all the time.
Oh man, there was that former Minot Daily News sports editor, Garrick Hodge, future guest of the show for sure. I remember one of his best pictures was you looking up into the top of the bus when it was completely, the emergency door was gashed out and blown away, and just the hopeless look on your face, thinking like, we have to drive to like Columbus and we can't make it an hour down. We're like in Washburn right now, and we're just like stuck here over this stupid window.
Right. Oh man, I totally forgot about that. Yeah, that was
brutal.
That was because it was weird because the eastern part of the state had got absolutely slammed with snow, and as a matter of fact, our main driver was going up. He's from Rugby, went up to Canada to get some dental work. I guess he was saying he was saving up the money, but he got snowed in and stuck. So we had to change the plan a little bit. Instead of going east to Grand Forks, we had to go south. And yeah, we're like 50 miles down the road, and all of a sudden, like, I'm just kind of laying there with my headphones in, and it's like a bomb goes off. The emergency thing blows off, and all of a sudden, it's like gone. Like, it's not like something you can go wherever. So we had to turn around. I mean, we drove back around, and it was just louder than heck. It's cold. I mean, and then it was like we basically left that night. I think it was later on, and what happened was they just basically screwed a piece of plywood on each side of that. I mean, it was crazy how they had put that together. But those long trips, you build in the travel time, because there was such a long, I mean, it's 20 hours to get to Columbus. You want to build in that extra day in advance. And looking back, could it have been a factor? It might have been. We would have liked to get in an extra day early, get loose.
All right.
Yeah. It was literally, I thought like a bomb went off. It literally sounded like it was such like explosion. It's not like the thing just kind of unlatched and you could hear the wind. It just boom, it was gone. So, yeah, that was certainly one of the wild ones for sure.
You definitely saw it coming, right?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've been in Colorado. There was a trip, we were stuck. I remember in Oklahoma, we were literally the driver heard something kind of, and the light went on, and sure enough, he pulls over, and it literally was like a little bit of a belt. It was like $1.50 fix, but it was a Sunday night, and we were getting ready to leave, and nobody's open, nobody's returning calls or whatever. So we had to stay in a hotel, 100 miles out of Oklahoma City. And then the next morning, guy came in, and it was $1.50 fix, and we were long, and I'm like, just killed us. And then we got in, Tuesday morning instead of Monday afternoon. Yeah, I tell you, there's so many. Ben, we could do a whole podcast on the bus, the troubles that we've had.
Yeah, I got you. So obviously your bus driver fits in with the rest of the team. All you hockey players, all you do is get Canadian dental work done.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to go a little back to the future here, and you brought up Wyatt a couple of times, and it might even be a good question for his background as well. Is who's going to be between the pipes next year for you guys? You got Bykowski and Kurtz maybe moving on. I mean, do you need me to suit up for you, or how's that recruiting going down?
I tell you, that's the number one question everybody's been asking, and it's certainly even our own roster guy, my own players are. I mean, it's I think they're just because what times we're in and how everybody's done junior hockey. Usually my players don't start signing until the end of April and early May. And now they're committing early because they're done. They're making their decisions like they would normally. But yeah, I mean, there's no secret. Goaltending is our number one concern in terms of what we need to do, especially because we know we have such a returning cast of players that is elite. We've got, we had a signing yesterday. We've got a couple that were really close, that we're feeling really good, that are going to be immediate impact freshmen right away. So we know our roster is going to be, it's just, what are we going to do about goaltending? And we're waiting. It's a waiting game. I know it's tough for, I know Wyatt, we've talked about it numerous times in our current players. We're feeling pretty good on a couple guys. We just signed one, we'll announce today. I don't know when obviously this is probably precast or whatever, but for, we're going to have a goaltender here today that we're going to be releasing this afternoon, and he's a good young kid. He's a freshman, but we are working on a couple other ones. We're hoping here in the next week or two, to get kind of get a good word. The other side of this thing, which is changing everybody, is this whole COVID-19 is are guys going to return to their schools that are way far away? And I don't know, it's just something instinctively, not to say that there's anything wrong with going away and that we're all going to be back to normal or whatever the new normal is in the fall. But it is something that, geez, even for our guys, when this happened, there was a notion of not being able to get over the border, which if you read between the lines, it wouldn't affect if you're a true citizen. And actually, as a matter of fact, if you're on a student visa, those can still come down. I know our guys have apartments that are down here and everything. But there was a fear that, oh, geez, they're going to close the border. I'm not going to be able to get home. And so there's a number of guys that, and I, instinctively talked to my parents and stuff. I mean, what the world we're living in and everything that goes with it. But, if you're 3 hours away from home, it's a lot easier if there's something to happen. Hey, I can go home and see mom and dad, or mom and dad can come and see me. If I'm out east in Pennsylvania, in your favorite Philadelphia there, those Eagles, man, but if you're going to a school out in those areas and you're from Saskatchewan or Manitoba, are you really going to want to go back out there again? And so I know that we've had some conversations with our players that have talking to various teammates and stuff, and just a little bit of, hey, what's going on? What's going to happen here in the fall? And that includes goaltenders. So we're kind of waiting here. I'm feeling very confident. As you said, the biggest thing about our pitch for goaltending is that the cupboard's wide open. You have a chance to start right away. And
it's an open net. Big. Don't let the puck in.
Yeah, it's something where, like last year, we had Bykowski and Holden, Kurtz, who were 2 in the top 10 in the nation, that could easily been number 1 goalies at any other school. We just happen to have 2 of them. Is that pretty hard to get in net, for anybody coming in knowing that we weren't going to be rocking the boat. And so that was tough. I mean, we wouldn't have to recruit a goaltender for those 2 guys. Well, now that they're both gone, that's a big thing. Hey, you can tell a freshman you're not going to sit here and wait a couple of years for your time. You have a chance to step in right away. So, yeah, we're hoping here. Like I said, we got a couple really good ones that we're working on, and it's just kind of a waiting game here. And it is like it's only early April, and like I said, most of my guys haven't committed usually in the past until May or June. So I feel like we're ahead of the game here, but the other side of this has been we're talking is a lot of guys aren't able to actually see the campus, and so I think in general, recruits are taking a little bit more time than they normally would because they don't have the ability to sit on campus, check the facilities, those type of things. So it'll be a waiting game here, but I'm feeling pretty confident in the next week or 2 here. We're going to have some good news on some really high-end goaltenders that we're looking at. And like I said, then look out. I mean, you're going to see, us really complete our roster because Wyatt and I are feeling very good about our roster going into next year. And, we only lost technically 7 total. Of that 7, 2 are already going to be aging out. We might potentially get a couple of those guys who were 4th years come back for potential 5th year. So we might not be losing a whole lot in terms of numbers, and so we're feeling really good going into next year.
There is the fact that you knew that question for a long time, regardless of how Nationals ended up. Like, both those guys were going to be gone. It wasn't like you were going to go into the postseason throwing some freshman to the Wolves and having to judge a performance like that and seeing if you were well enough for the future based on that guy and how he performed under the lights. You always had that question for most of the year. If that's any kind of consolation to the situation, I'm sure you guys will figure it out, a good enough situation. But that kind of leads into it that the national tournament obviously, unfortunately, had to be canceled this year. How difficult was it for you guys first hearing the news and just in the days after that?
You're absolutely right, Ben. I mean, it's crazy how the dominoes affected on all of this. We knew something was up partly a week before because they announced usually 2 weeks the seeding, and then there's that weekend off in between. And right before ours officially had been canceled, we already knew that Stony Brook University in New York and Drexel, which I think is in Philadelphia.
Yep.
Is it okay? So
Great
Drexel,
architecture school. Yeah.
Yeah. So Drexel and Stony Brook, their university campus had already shut down. Obviously, those cities had been a lot more affected. And then in terms, they were not allowing their teams to travel to the national tournament. So what happened was at about a week before, we were told tournament's still on, but instead of it being a 20-team tournament, they were going to reduce it to an 18-team tournament. And basically, And Drexel was, I think they were 15 seed, and then the big one was Stony Brook was ranked 7th. Is that they were just literally going to slide everybody up a spot. And in fact, everybody was joking around the country. It was like, Minot State plays Jamestown, 10 times a year, and then lo and behold, we have to play each other in the first round. It was that.
Oh, yeah, that wasn't lost on anybody, buddy.
Yeah, no, everybody. I mean, literally everybody. I mean, it was crazy how that, that transpired. But having said all that, is that the reseeded. So basically, we're talking the Thursday, we're talking 5 days before we're about to leave, and we were going to be told, hey, we're not going to play Jamestown, we're going to play UCO. So my phone blew up I think it was like that Wednesday or Thursday, because all of a sudden all the coaches were changing who they were playing, and then they're asking scouting reports and all that stuff. So we knew that something was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, it just like everybody else, I was on watching basketball. I think it was NBA basketball, and then it's like player gets tested positive, and then like the next day, everything just we kind of held
like the Mark Cuban freak out reaction when he was on the sideline.
Yeah, all that. So and then all of a sudden it just transpires. But it's tough. It's devastating, and I don't want to sound very cocky or conceited or anything when I say this, but it's a lot different when you cancel a tournament for a team that has a legitimate shot to win it, as opposed to a team that, isn't going to win it, but it's just a cool experience for their players. And I don't want that to sound like conceited or anything, but there is a little bit of it. Yes, I understand that, you lost an experience to go play one game at a national tournament and see everything else. But for us, legitimate chance to win it and go for it again is a lot crushing. And, because you're like, geez, our name could have easily been on that title again. And, our guys had gone through we had 2 5-year guys came back specifically because they knew we had a chance to win it again. Holden, Kurtz and Dylan Johnson were playing their 5th year. So they knew that, hey, I'm coming back. I'm triple majoring in business for Dylan Johnson. Holden Kurtz was in graduate school specifically for a chance to do this again. And yeah, it's devastating. And, feel bad, especially because I mean, Ben, I'm here. I'm not staying here forever, but I'm here for a long time, and this is my 11th season. This is me next year. I get to come back again. This is my career. Whereas those guys, it's over, and that's tough. That is very tough. To grasp for those young guys, and I feel bad for my guys. It was like I said, not a dry eye in our locker room because they knew it was happening. I texted and I said, hey, we had a practice lined up on Tuesday, and it was like, hey, can you guys come? Don't get dressed. And they knew right away, and they could just tell from the text message that goes to the group that something wasn't happening. So
it wasn't going to be a party.
Yeah. So it's it was tough. Like I said, not a dry eye in that locker room, and to tell, because usually you lose your last game or you win your last game, and you're in a locker room with guys that are full of gear, and you do it, but now all of a sudden you don't even have that chance to do it. So
and you're never in the moment really, because their last game turned out to be a game that was weeks before they thought they were going to a national tournament. None of those guys, obviously, you're the defending national champions. None of those guys in the final game of their regular season are thinking, boy, this is the last time I'm playing for Minot State in the moment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Completely robs it in the past and looking back, Yeah.
Well, and I try to put it into perspective a little bit. I mean, part of the thing is when I was a player at Minot State from 2004 to 2008, we were bad. I mean, my sophomore year, I think we won 4 or 5 games max.
You tell the guys to hey, I'm the coach now, don't do what all of us were doing back then, or what?
I mean, I know Wyatt, he certainly presses hard a little bit too, but he was kind of the starting part of that. But he was also starting part of when the lean years in terms of having 5 guys staying in a motel, 6 when we go on road trips, middle rink slash back and forth with the all seasons. But for me, my last games were always in the middle of February. I mean, we would come into going to Iowa State. We knew we weren't going to national tournament. Last game of the year is, February 14th or whatever. And, we're saying our goodbyes and that's over. Well, these guys, we're in the national tournament every year, and we're, it's at the end of March, and being able to go through those type of things. So, yeah, it's certainly tough. But, hey, trying to put it into perspective. And I think our guys understand, what's going on in the world here. But I feel like it's going to be something that you reflect back a number of years ago, like what could have been for sure.
Yeah, these guys, I mean, they wrap up their careers usually with a national championship appearance. You guys would wrap them up with just all the pomp and circumstance of a trip to Ames, Iowa, I suppose, and that was about it. Put a bow on it, huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, it really was. I mean, it's, and I'd tell you my senior year was probably the toughest one because we weren't ranked, and Iowa State was ranked like 7th, and it was an exhibition series because they didn't have a conference tournament back then, and it was our last games of the year, and we beat them. And it was like, oh yeah, we were good enough. We just didn't get there. But that was a big thing for us, is winning one of those games against Iowa, because at least we knew all along. We knew we were good enough. We just didn't put it together all season long.
What a great way to wrap it up, just riding off into the sunset that year. Maybe it looks like the parade at the end of Animal House, where like the ragtag guys finally take everything over for that one game. That's awesome. So also I wanted to touch on this for a little bit. Was one of the new experiences that was going to happen at the 2020 Nationals is having the Honeymans back in the rink. That would have been an awesome experience. Obviously, Robyn Honeyman, one of your trainers, does a lot for this team. Her husband, unfortunately, in an accident, and it's been a long road to recovery back for him. Talk about first what Robyn means to the success of the hockey team, how you guys kind of helped them in the aftermath, and what it meant to keep in touch and win the championship when they were, from afar.
Yeah, boy, it's just like anything else in life, right? It hits you harder a lot, especially for people that are close to you, and just like any time that you hear a tragedy or a car accident, and you're like, oh, that's sad or whatever. Then you find out it's somebody that you know and you're familiar with, and I remember seeing reports of a bad accident on Highway 83 and not thinking anything, and all of a sudden within about a handful of hours, it's like, oh, it's Robyn's Mike, and those type of things, and then it really hits you home, and you're like, survives it, and you're like, wow, like this is crazy, and kind of everything that they've been through. I mean, it's absolutely a miracle where he is at right now, and even some of the road trips where we've gone on, and just being able to, like, she's FaceTiming him and he's saying hi, and they're actually, I mean, it's crazy to think, and you hear stories of what the vehicle looks like. But no, Robyn's been a big absolute staple of our program, and our program, is everybody knows, is not directly connected to athletics. We're basically almost kind of on our own a little bit, but we've had some transition from our coaching staffs, from when Brian Wilkie started it, through Todd McMurtry to Bernie Lynch to Sheldon to myself, and we've seen a lot of the leaps and bounds that happens for all programs, both on the ice and then of course off the ice.
But she's been a constant.
Yes, she has, absolutely. She's been there the whole time. I mean, she's been there since 2000. She's been through the lean years, and then she's been through the great years. And I tell you, when we won in 2013, there was two people that were like Lisa Erickson, who was our longtime campus advisor, and Robyn. I mean, they were so emotionally, proud to finally do it. All their hard work and all the things that they had to do, to be able to do it. And Robyn's been through it all. I mean, Robyn's our trainer, but she's kind of like sometimes like the unofficial like office manager on the road. I mean, she helps, coordinate. Hey, when's the meals? Like when's the, when are we leaving? How's the hotel situation? She's always been kind of that constant part of it. And then you fast forward to 2019, and I won my second title, and of course it's an exciting thing to do. I'm thinking of it as a general manager, like Bill Belichick, like, okay, let's move on to the next one type of thing. Let's enjoy it. But then to see her walk through the hallway, and the tournament manager, Russ Slagle, has known Robyn, I mean, all those years and stuff, giving her an extra medal and say, here, this is for Mike. And so, because we all get those team medals that we all got, and her in just absolute tears, and then her coming into the locker room afterwards and saying, thank you guys, this is something that we always needed and everything. But no, I mean, she's been there for everything for us, and everything that we've done for our team. And she gets to enjoy the successes that go. And of course, anytime she's ever needed any help, the boys were moving things for them, moving things out of their house, and doing different things. Or their wedding, they got married at the auditorium, and our guys being some ushers and helping out with some of those type of things. And it's been great to know that she can lean on our guys. And you know what, it's for her and Mike, I'm just so amazed and so glad that he's making strides, and and trying to get back to a normal life. And I hope he just continues to keep getting better and better. And 10 years from now, it's, hey, he's constantly walking. You like to say, man, that was an unbelievable recovery. But no, Robyn's been awesome for us, and like I said, she is just kind of like what do you say, the constant figure, almost like a mother sometimes. I tell you, when the boys are wrong, if they're not, not if they hurt their shoulder and they're not going to see her, she's gonna she's gonna let them know, or she's gonna let me know, like, get on these guys. Someone skipped out an appointment to see Dr. Madden or whatever, but you need that. You need that stern, hey, kind of motherly figure sometimes, and she's certainly been that for us.
Yeah, I mean, when I cut a story together with them and you guys for the news, just about your relationship ever, like before that and since then, really, I was really happy to learn how much the community stepped up, where all the trips that she had to make to Nebraska, and didn't have to pay anything for that. And, you can really tell what she means to people when people return a favor like that. But when they're finally fortunate enough to be back in town, and Mike's hanging out with you guys. He's happy to be there for all those Wednesday workouts and things behind the concession stand at the old half of the Mesa. What kind of example does a guy like that set for your players when they're working through hockey workouts, and he's working obviously with what he's working on?
Absolutely. I mean, it puts life into perspective. It makes you feel like you're very fortunate. And then, anytime you complain about the little things, we call it first world problems in life, and it's like, geez, my washer's not working or whatever, blah blah blah, or just in general, like, man, I'm struggling with this. Is that it could be a heck of a lot worse, and so you got to feel fortunate. The other side of it is I know Robyn says, live your day like it's. I mean, not to say it's your last, but just live life to the fullest, because it could be changed in an instant, and that's certainly in the case for them, and for those guys, it's something I think it allows you to persevere. I mean, I remember watching. They have the Honeyman Strong. They had the Facebook group, and they would show videos of him when he was down in Nebraska, and even when we'd be on the road, she would show some things like, hey, this is what he's doing. He's able to stand, or he's moving his arm. Like just little things like that were kind of like little successes every day, and it really puts things into perspective. And I know our guys. Like I said, it's something that's vitally important, and I think that also is the kind of goes back to that relationship that not only Robyn has with our program, but I have with Robyn. I mean, it's a very I'd like to toot my horn to say that I've probably been one of the best coaches that she's worked with, because I know that in the medical field, she's the boss. Like, there's no, like, I mean, you talk about horror stories of coaches trying to throw players on the field.
You want the guys on the ice so bad, but I mean, they can't
like
go, they can't go.
Yeah, like concussions and stuff, and we instill that. I mean, I joke around with some of my players that get a big hit, and I'll be sitting there and on the bench and saying, "Hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, an accountant. Oh, okay. You're going to need your brain. You're going to need your brain in 10 years to be able to do this stuff. So don't be sitting here trying to be a hero, in January against you, Mary. When sit it out. Let's be safe here." And she knows she's the boss, and she knows that if she's telling me, a call 2 days before a game and say this player shouldn't be playing, then he doesn't play. And I don't ever question it. And she knows what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish. And, and she also knows that, not to get ahead of ourselves, that we are going to be at the national tournament every year. We're a team that's going for it every year. She knows that, hey, if we sit this guy out right now, we're going to be able to get through this and he's going to be fine. Or B, hey, if this was a national championship game, I would make sure that he's ready to go. And just that dynamic, which really makes it. But, yeah, like I said, it's been a great relationship for her and our program, and, her and Mike. And it's awesome that, like I said, I hope everything just gets better and better. And that's what we're always hoping and praying for sure.
A lot of what we've been covering so far has kind of shown what the culture and success of the team is all about, the moving pieces going forward after a lost national tournament. So, and even when you're mentioning about evaluating, you need your accountant brain later or whatever, there's an educational aspect to that. So I'm kind of wondering what's kind of been during your tenure, maybe before winning championships, during this era, and even moving forward into the future. What's your idea of your recruiting pitch for players to join an ACHA team? And has there ever been times where there's varsity programs that kind of go head-to-head with some of these guys?
Oh, it is. Absolutely, Ben. You're absolutely right. I mean, right now, every one of my recruits, are players that we feel can play at the next level, and we're just trying to convince them to play at our level. And I think the biggest thing that's changed in hockey, college hockey landscape, is just the overall body of what's going on. Division One, there's no secret. It's the top dog. Everybody knows that. But then it used to be Division Three, and then it was ACHA Division One, and it has completely meshed for what's next after Division One. And there's a number of reasons for it. Some of it is geographic. Guys don't want to go to certain regions. Or B, the cost has changed a lot of things. Well, for whatever reason, our level now it's a fighting game. And as you said, Ben, every one of my guys that we are talking to have at least 10 to 12 different other options. And what do we pitch at our school, and what is it, the ability to get these guys to come here? Number one is, I will say this is an absolute gift, is that Minot State University got rid of its out-of-state rates of tuition back in, I think it was 2012, 2011. And that was a game changer. So if you came from we had players from Wisconsin, we had players from California, and then obviously Canada. If you came from a ring that didn't touch our state of North Dakota, you're basically paying double. So instead of it being $5,000, you would be paying $10,000, and that would pretty much price out, any competitive advantage that we would have. Now, with those rates being changed, it's awesome. It's a game changer, because now we can talk about, hey, we are an affordable option for you to be able to look for. The other side of this is, like you said, is the competing of what type of schools you're looking for. And Minot State's a perfect size. I love the size of our school because it's 3,500 total students. There's only about 2,200 that are actually face-to-face. But it has everything that you need, but yet it's not, it's not St. Cloud, which is, 15,000, or St. Thomas, in Minnesota there, which is 10,000. It's like all these big schools that are, you have 300 students in them and stuff. And that's an advantage, I think, in terms of, what we're trying to look for in terms of students, because we have, basically all the programs you have. Now, I cringe when I ask what you're looking to do in school. And if they say, engineering or architecture.
Play
or whatever,
hockey.
Yeah, I'm like, we don't have those programs. But no, the other side of this is pretty remarkable that I don't know what it is that it's just something about hockey. But, man, I get some really good students. Even just now, a kid that's signed, yesterday, I forget his SAT, but it was like 11 or 1,200. It was high. It's another kid I talked to on the phone a couple days ago, and, it's like, what'd you get on your SAT? It's like 1180, and he had like a 3.8 high school GPA. And I'm like, holy cow, like, these kids are smart, which is awesome, which is what we look for. But, all of it's all encompassing. You try to find out, in the recruiting process through scouting, kind of what is they're kind of looking at. You can tell, hey, talking to coach, this kid have a lot of money? Do they not have a lot of money? If they don't have a lot of money, that might feel like that might be a good spot. If they're on their own, we might have a feeling for it. Or, this kid is getting, 4 NCAA Division I opportunities, but there are no scholarship money, and he could be number 26, 27 on the roster. And I'm like, he could be a top 6 player for us, or top 4 defenseman, or, like we're talking about before, goalies. I had a conversation with a goalie 2 days ago, and he mentioned off a school in Canada, and he mentioned a school in, I think it was Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I'm like, you do know that in the University of Manitoba, they have 2 goalies that are like freshman and sophomore that are really good. They ain't moving. So you're going to be probably number 3 there. And then the other one was Eau Claire. They are returning their number 1 goalie, who is like an All-American, and they just signed a kid out of I think it was like Johnstown, New York, or whatever, and the NA at the same level as the Toros. You are going to be fighting to just be a backup, whereas I'm like, come in and be our guy. And so those are things that I know we try to identify in the the pre-scouting reports on some of the stuff that we go on. But yeah, it's a war out there, and kind of go back. It's a battle now that I think we're all now knowing what's going in, is that these guys all have a number of options to choose from.
Talking about like the ACHA versus varsity, I got a kick out of it a few years ago. There was so much hype around when Arizona State got like their D1 school, and I'm like thinking in the background, the level that you guys play. The Sun Devils have been here, like the Sweet Jerseys have been here, whatever. It's no news. I always just thought that was kind of interesting, and you kind of touched on something about showing how players can be the guy here versus in other places they might be considering. Obviously, you don't want to hurt your chances or anything, but you guys are the defending national champions, man, going into another recruiting period here that's going to be longer than anybody expected, really. And what do you think other programs say kind of in that vein about MSU to try to get their players?
Yeah, you're right.
And how do you overcome it,
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think, the thing about recruiting is you understand what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and you really exploit your strengths and you hide your weaknesses. Like Arizona State, as you alluded to. I remember when they were an ACHA program, they were a powerhouse just like us. We would see each other in the top five, pretty much every year. We won it in 2013. They won it in 2014, and for them, their out-of-state tuition was very expensive. It was like 20 grand. And so he wouldn't talk a lot about finances. What he would push is, look at the weather. Look at this weather. It's awesome. Like, you show up in shorts and flip-flops to practice on a daily basis, like kind of pushing that type of thing. I know in
healthy
like,
bro mentality. Just a couple
absolutely.
of shorts and flops.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I know like in Iowa State's case, we compete with them on a number of players, not so much recently, but definitely in the past. And you know what? They would exploit the fact that Iowa State's a very good, prestigious institution where, you're going to get a business degree from the XYZ business college, which is better than, Minot State's or whatever. They would use those things to kind of, exploit those type of areas. The other side of this, too, is that, if you're a top 10 team, top 15 team in the ACHA, you have a legitimate shot to win it every year. So even though we were able to win it last year, Iowa State could have easily beat us in that championship game. I mean, Lindenwood could have beat us in the semifinal and, potentially won it there. Is that you are at least going to these competitive areas. And one of the things that I do at the beginning of the year is kind of like a culture story, is I go dig up old stories of their
Washington Redskins. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
What I do is I'll go and see, kid played for the, let's say played for the Winnipeg Blues or the Manitoba Junior League. Well, I will go and say, okay, Channel 9 Winnipeg, and it's like, okay, Winnipeg Blues falter, lose in Game 3, season over. And I read these stories off to all these people coming in, is that almost every single person that comes into our locker room did not win their last game, they did not win their championship, or they didn't make the playoffs or whatever, is that I come in and say, hey, what was our last story? And it was like, we won a national title. Let's make sure that everybody else's last story is the same, which is Beavers, whatever Alex Eisen wrote, win their elusive championship or whatever. And that's a big thing that goes with it. So, the big thing about recruiting is, attack your strengths and hide your weaknesses. I mean, like I said, a weakness for us, we don't have, an engineering program or, some of these very high-end technical ones. We don't have that. And so I'm, trying to push, like, let's not talk so much about, hey, if you're thinking of wanting to do engineering, hey, you can do all these other things and stuff. It's like trying to find out what it is that our strength is. I mean, we have great crowds, we've got great facilities, our campus is a great size, the cost is very affordable. The other thing too is I always forget, we travel all over the U.S. I mean, it's crazy. We go everywhere. I mean, next year's schedule, is including going to Liberty to play in Virginia. We're going, Nationals is in Boston. I've never been to Boston before. That's going to be a cool
great
experience.
spot. I was there in 2011 for my cousin's wedding, and we were in the hotel at Marriott Long Wharf, and the Bruins won in Vancouver. Remember, Canucks had home ice in that series the night before, and the next day, happy hour, 3 o'clock. It's called Tia's, and the Bruins were down there just slinging them with the Stanley Cup. We were going to go to the parade, but that just took care of it. It was easier. It wasn't a madhouse. They were just there. That was like when Tyler Seguin and Brad Marchand were like baby faces, and Zdeno Chara was still old at that point, and that was like 9 years ago. So
and
he's a big dude, though. You shouldn't say too much.
Pretty much burned down. I mean, the riots and everything. I mean, it was chaos there in Vancouver.
Yeah, for sure.
They've had some pretty bad. I think that's like the third. Is that the third time? I think they lost in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. I know in '94 they lost to the Rangers. I think it was Game 7. And I think there was one other time where they lost in the finals, and it was like Game 6. I'm like, they've had some hard luck. But yeah, no, it's pretty cool. Yeah, we're going to Boston. We're going to go to Virginia. We're going to go to Arizona. I think we're going to Vegas. I mean, it's pretty cool that we get. I get to tell. I mean, some of these guys. Actually, this year, you want to talk about a funny story. One of my players, we flew to Vegas this year in January. It was the first time he ever went on an airplane. That is absolutely crazy. I mean, he's 21 years old, but I mean, my little 5-year-old's been on probably 5-6 times already. So, it's pretty crazy. But it is something from a recruiting standpoint. The tour of the U.S. is pretty cool, especially if you're a small town Saskatchewan or Manitoba kid. you're coming from a town of 100 people. It's pretty cool to be able to travel.
How well behaved is your kid by now on an airplane?
You know what? She's pretty good. You know what? She's pretty independent. I think you really have to break all the rules as a parent just to make sure that they're happy. Giving them whatever they want to drink. You don't let them drink Coke. You're going to let them have some Coke if they're good. And the other side of it is you really got to load up your iPad with movies and games and stuff. And especially like my wife and daughter, they went to visit my sister-in-law down in Arizona for spring break right before this all kind of went down. It's like, hey, you got to have everything headphones on and do all those things. And apparently she was great. So, it's a little different when you're 5. We went to Virginia when she was 2. And that was a bit of a struggle because it was an early morning flight. We had to wake up at like 4 a.m. And
that was a struggle for you too. Let's be real.
Yeah,
you probably just passed it down.
Absolutely.
But anyway, talking back to Western Canada, now that Vancouver's built back up from 2011, is I kind of catches my eye, both the roster here and some of the recruiting news that Minot State has had as of late. A lot of Western Canadian Junior Hockey League presence. What's kind of like your explanation for that? And I know there's obviously we're recording this today, and it's not going to be over yet for a little while here. But at this point in time, what do you kind of expect this year's class to look like when you get them in the first camp, whenever that happens?
Yeah, it's in the perfect world, I certainly all coaches will realize this, especially if you're not at the highest level where you're basically recruiting nationally. But for us, you find your pool, you find your area, and you find your region, and then you drill home there, and there's a familiarity with it. The Manitoba Junior League, they've got Division I players, has been one of my biggest strengths, but it's because we have so many currently on the roster, and then being able to relate that to new recruits is a lot easier. When you talk to a kid in the North American League that plays for the Toros and trying to explain to them what the ACHA is, you ask that first question: Are you aware of the ACHA? Are you aware of Minot State? And more often than not, like, no, I'm not very familiar. Then you're having to talk for about 10 minutes to kind of explain the level. For me, Western. I would. It's not like I prefer. We have so many Canadians on our roster. It's not to say that I'm prejudiced because I am from Canada and I'm living in the States. It's just the way that it's worked. Those kids really have identified with us because we have so many. And so when I talk to those kids, I had a kid that I talked to about 3 days ago that was from BC, and I'm like, hey, have you heard of Minot State or the ACHA, or is that pretty foreign? He's like, oh yeah, no, I know, blah blah. He's like, one of my buddies is playing in Liberty. I have a friend playing it for UNLV, and there's just that, oh, okay. So there was there's that familiarity already. So then I'm not even having to explain the things we talked about, what are the levels of hockey here and where they are and stuff. We can get right into the meat and potatoes of what's our school and the costs and those type of things, and it's a big part of it for us because it allows us to be able to get those home runs that we really do, and going back to those things that I talked about earlier, that okay, you already know our roster, all right, and that's part of the reason why we had so much success. We just signed a defenseman yesterday, and he knows 7 guys on the roster, and he played with a couple guys a couple years ago. He played peewee hockey with 3 guys. These guys. Said my mom called when I called him for the first time. Let him know about Minot State. He told his parents. Well, then his mom called another mom of one of my current players, and it was just that connection. And especially those that are in Western Canada that are close. I always joke about when we talk about cost and location is if you decide to go play for SUNY Morrisville or SUNY Oswego out in New York, is that your mom or dad are going to fly probably maybe once or twice to go watch you play. If you come play for Minot State, they will come for every big weekend, which is usually once a month. Usually about once a month we have a big weekend. Somebody's flying up or whatever. And guess what? Now you're getting to see your kid play on a regular basis. And then the other side of this is which I loved when my parents, is that my mom didn't come on every trip, but my dad would come on all of them. And my mom would be throwing in like cookies or a frozen lasagna or something, and like just things like that you have that ability to.
'Cause you're working out so hard, you deserve that comfort food, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure
absolutely.
That's how it was in the lean years, right? Literally, or what?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
I think I kind of get where you're coming from. The thing is, I mean, obviously North Dakota might have like its national like ideal when people like aren't from around here and stuff. But I mean, I guess maybe you have to just kind of cut through that in a few minutes and just say like, you see like the banners here and stuff. And it's underrated, some of the flights that come into the Minot airport. I mean, for like what you guys kind of need to do. I even saw like probably the newest example was like the rumor that Elliot Friedman was floating around how the NHL would consider to come to North Dakota, and even in his write-up or like someone else's, it was Grand Forks, because like UND's there, and they said they'll need multiple locations. That's the problem. They'll have to convert everything surrounding the Ralph in Grand Forks only. They're like, you can't really have too many separate places. Duluth, Minnesota, because we know about that place, is 4 hours away. Like, the Mesa has 3 rinks, and the best one is a really high quality stadium. You know what I'm saying, for what the town needs and stuff like that. And that's 3 hours away. So I mean, I don't know, whatever. So the following that up, kind of, what's been the toughest part about remaining on the top of this mountain, whether you're winning the championships or not? You guys seem to always be right there. And furthermore, what does it mean for you as coach to be doing this at your alma mater?
It's awesome. I mean, I like to say I kind of bet on myself a little bit. When we talk about the evolution of our hockey program, and when I was a player in those lean years, to Sheldon Schneider, who was my coach my senior year, and then I was an assistant coach under him for 2 seasons, and see how he basically saved our program.
What did you take from him?
I mean, for him, what I really took from him is that he loved this program and loved the opportunity to play at Minot State, as did I. As much as it was a bad time from our hockey standpoint, I had 3 coaches in 4 years. It was very tough to, from that standpoint. But just the camaraderie and the friendships that I made, and the cool experience that I had off the ice. I mean, I ran intramurals for a year. I was student government president. I met my wife my senior year, basically, and
you're in trouble now if she ever listens this deep into the show. It's like you mentioned that stuff, and then by the way, I met this person.
Yeah, exactly.
Good on you, man. You'll be sitting next to your kid on the next flight.
Absolutely. No, I met my lovely wife, and she had a great experience, and and that's part of it. I think that bodes well for me personally, is that even though Minot State has evolved as a campus and changed, is that I've driven home that it is a cool experience. That's really, when you dig down into recruiting, you really are just selling an experience that goes with it. But for me, how Sheldon turned the program around so that when I took over in 2010, I'm like, okay, I can do a lot of things here. I feel like I've been turned over keys to a car that's been completely renovated. Now I can go and drive it and go out and not only form the what I felt was a roster on the ice, but also the culture off the ice, and being able to get businesses on board and get fan support, and seeing that grow, and then obviously explode once the new rink came in, and seeing our numbers go through the roof in terms of our attendance and the money that comes in, and what we're able to provide our programs. But I really bet on myself. I mean, after the 2013 season, I will admit I had a number of universities calling, and junior teams in Canada specifically. I had board members for, like the Estevan Bruins, and there was one from L'Orange. There was one in, I think it was, can't remember which place it was in Manitoba. Like, there were places like, hey, is there any interest to come coach junior hockey? Or, like there was a school in New York that the athletic director said, hey, would you be willing to come out here and, take a look? And, at that time, I was, young, married, and those type of decisions. But I felt like, what? I am going to build this thing up that I'm never going to want to leave. I'm going to build this thing up to literally what I want it to be, which is, you have 60 Division I hockey teams, that we'd be the next option, and that we're the next best thing to playing Division I hockey. And we're pretty close to that spot. If you really add our facilities and where we're at in terms of that, we are the next best spot. So I really bet on myself in terms of that, and that was a big thing for me. The other side of this is, Ben, and as a coach, is it's fun coaching a team that's going for it every year, and I enjoy it. And but I do know that there are coaches that do enjoy that. Hey, go to a rebuilding stage and doing the ground up type of thing. And And I'd like to say I did it, and I did it in my first few years, but now I'm at that point where it'd be really hard, I think, as a coach, that even if I took over another program or was offered more money or whatever, would I really enjoy having to spend, 2 to 3 years really rebuilding and going through that growing pains and, losing a lot of games.
Giving Sheldon the choice that you gave him when you were a player, basically, right? Or what?
You know what? No. I tell you, my losses are in my professional teams that I cheer for. Professional teams lose a lot, so I get my losses from watching my pro sports teams.
It all evens out in the end, yeah.
It does. It evens out with my own. So it's one of those things where, like I said, I enjoy that, hey, I'm going for it every year. My rosters are, are locked and ready to go. And I think that's a big part of our success.
You mentioned that you're like the next team up besides like the Division I hockey level. NDSU, they go down to Iowa and they beat a team that was ranked like 13th or 15th in the country that year. So you're the coach of this team. They're the next team up. The Bison have been a dynasty in football. How many of the Division I hockey teams are you guys beating on your best night?
It's going to be very good question. I do remember the year we won it in 2013 is kind of my measuring stick. That season was when Penn State had made the official jump to Division I. They announced it in 2010. That big gift, the guy that owns the Buffalo Sabres, the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, the goalies.
He donated, I think it was $150 million to Penn State, 100 of which went to their new rink, but $50 million went to the addition of hockey. And in 2013, that year we won it, they were playing their first full season of Division I hockey. And halfway through there, they played, I think it was 24 games of Division I, and then they sprinkled in, I think it was 6 ACHA games. There was basically their non-conference schedule because they weren't, I think that year they weren't getting a whole lot of home games from the Division I teams as part of like scheduling and so forth. And so they had 6 games of Division I, and 2 of them was against Arizona State. And Arizona
it always
State,
comes back to Arizona State.
Yeah, of course. And Arizona State lost, I think it was 5-1 the first night, and then they won 4-2 the next night. And so, and Penn State that season had 12 Division I wins. They were. I mean, there was their first full year. They had 12, 10 or 11, or 12, I think it was 12 Division I wins. So Arizona State beats them. Well, we beat Arizona State all 3 times we played them that year. And so I'd like to say 2 + 2 = 4, right? So if we would have been able to play, Penn State, would we have had a chance to win? I know those lower Len teams, we are in every one of those games. Dude, I mean, it's not to say we would win, but we would be in every one of those games. And I don't want to throw some teams under the bus like Sacred Heart or Bentley or what is it, Alabama Huntsville or some of these programs that are, obviously at the bottom end of the Division I bowl. But we would be in those games. There's no doubt about it. We would be competing with them, and then just like hockey, you never know what's going to have a chance. But the thing is that, they would obviously beat us in 7-game series just because of the depth and the speed and everything that goes with it. But, a 1-game exhibition, puncher's chance. You never know
ACHA national tournament.
Yeah, so.
I was going to say, you were getting close to the limit there. I mean, the bold number 1 hockey coach here, he's given this story. It's a numerical question. I want to hear the means to the end. So yeah, with all this in mind, carry the 2. Well, yeah, we'd beat half the league.
Yeah, well, hey,
yeah, whatever.
I tell you, it's. I think that really was a good measuring test for us too, because I mean, like I said, we were all kind of curious about it, and the crazy thing is we as a program right now, just on attendance figures, would actually be ahead of I think 15 Division I teams in attendance. Like there's some Division I teams that only average 400 fans, and it's crazy that they still actually have Division I hockey in some of those areas. But no, like I said, you never know how that would work, and if we get our goaltender to play well and we get a couple bounces, I mean, who never knows in terms of that. I just know we would be in those games. Now we're playing UND. We're not in that game, especially them ranked number 1. It'd be,
what? You're not in that game? Number 1 versus number 1? AFL, NFL?
No.
It's not the same?
Exactly. Okay. No, it's, I tell you, that would be, they're just, the speed is just, it's not even close.
Speaking of speed, let's hop into the Wayback Machine. And what were some of your best and funniest moments of being a junior player?
Holy cow. For me, when I played for the Saskatoon Chiefs, I, as a matter of fact, I mean, I got cut 2 times that year, actually. I got cut by the Melfort Mustangs, and then I got sent down to the was the Saskatoon Wesleys at the time, and I thought
Like
that the coach
Wesley
was talking,
Ford, not a sponsor.
yeah, kind of the same name, but no, I got cut by them. I thought I was going to make the team, and then another team picked me up, and we were the Saskatoon Chiefs, and the jerseys were just like the Charlestown Chiefs from Slapshot. Like it was, we were like
Same identity and everything, or what?
Yeah, everything. I mean, it was, and at that time, it really was like the jungle is what they called Jungle Bees with the nickname was, because it was a lot of fighting. I mean, it was, as soon as someone would get up and 4 or 5 goals, all of a sudden you just see the line brawl and all the stuff that goes with it. So I mean, it was literally watching as if it was Slapshot. But for me, that was crazy. Was that first year, my 18-year-old season, we were 500 and we just barely made the playoffs, and we weren't very good. And then we played the number 1 team, the Saskatoon Royals, who had won the North Division 7 years in a row, and they had sent a number of guys. I think they actually have a handful of guys that played in the NHL. That's how good of a junior program that they were. And we upset them in Game 7. And I remember we were so excited. Like we were in the series, the games were tight, and then all of a sudden, Game 7, we win like a tight one, like 3-2. And we thought it was pretty cool. Okay, so then the next series, we played that team that cut me, the Wesleys, and they in turn were another powerhouse team. And again, I remember we went forced to Game 7, and I think I played the game of my life, and got to take a 3 assists. We beat them 4-2 or whatever. And the funny part about that whole thing was our owner owned a bowling alley called Rack's Pinhouse. His name was Terry Rack, and he owned a bowling alley.
Who owns Rack's? That's like me talking to Ray Cook at Paradiso about food.
Yeah. So this guy owns a bowling alley, and we win Game 7 of the league final, upset the Wesleys. The coach actually shook my hand and said, "Hey, Wade, just let you know I made a mistake. I shouldn't have cut you.
We couldn't have spared you."
Yeah. So then the owner comes into our locker room after this championship and says, "Let's all come to Rack's Pinhouse right away here." And so we're like, "Oh, we're all excited." So we go to Rack's Pinhouse, and it's packed. I mean, it's 9:30 at night. You still have some families. You got patrons. I mean, like every lane is full or whatever. And so we pour into this thing, and all of a sudden the owner goes to the microphone and he goes, "Attention all patrons, attention all patrons. We're just letting you know that Rack's Pinhouse will be closing early and immediately. Please finish up your game. If you have paid for any other games, we will refund you, blah, blah, blah." So we sat in the corner of this little lounge. We're just sitting here waiting here. What's going on here? Finally wait for all the patrons. The place is open till midnight. Gets everybody out of this place. And then he goes, "Here you go, boys. I'm leaving." And he literally gave us the place, including the bar and everything else. Yeah, all the rules were out the door.
You no longer felt like you were being rude at that point.
No.
Okay,
no.
good.
We got to do whatever we want in that place. We could go bowling. We could do whatever. And so, yeah, that was pretty wild. Like I said, one of my best man at my wedding. We still talk about that story. But
go bowl. Emphasis on the do whatever, probably.
Yeah,
but
do whatever. No bartenders.
That's a different show. That's a different show. I had my best game of bowling ever at the Lucky Strike after a long day at the Lucky Strike, and it wasn't for practicing bowling. It was a football Sunday. But anyway, sounds about right. So obviously you moved on to college hockey, but just wondering just the scope of what junior hockey means and being a part of a junior hockey team, like in where you were from.
Yeah. So, I mean,
an atmosphere of like different rinks, either whether it's the Blades or on down.
Yeah. And the thing about the way hockey is really interesting, how that dynamic works with college athletics. I remember having long conversations with Steve Swenson, the compliance officer, and having discussions about how hockey works, and like culture. You go from high school to college. Like
he's a San Diego Gulls fan now, from where he's at now. Beautiful area. Yeah.
And so but in hockey, there's that junior level that just confuses everybody. And for whatever reason, all of my players come from junior hockey, and it is something that's a requirement now. I don't recruit players unless they play at least 2 to 3 years of junior hockey. So I actually, I have lots of conversations with high school kids, especially in North Dakota and elsewhere, that I do not recruit you as an 18-year-old. You need to be 20 or 21. And there's a number of reasons for this, much of the fact that my average age of my team is 23 years old. So if you're 18, that's just culturally different when you're an 18-year-old until you're 23. It's just different wavelengths. But playing junior hockey to coming to college for me personally, and what I see from my guys is that when you are come to me as a freshman, you are ready for college. You are ready to go to school, and you are ready to be able to handle the rigors of going to school and playing college hockey, going on long road trips and missing lots of days of school, which is a big part of what we are. And so that is something that is built in with my own guys, including my own experience, is that when I'm 21 years old, I'm ready to go to school. And I think that transition has allowed even myself, like I was 21. I'm like, this is the last chance. I'm not going to waste this away. I'm not going to be what's a Tommy boy and be a 7-year
super senior,
right? Yeah, like the joke of David Spade calling it, they're called doctors, right? So, but
yeah.
no, it's a big part of how it is. It's a big part of who I was as an individual, and it's a big part of our culture, because most of my guys, when they're getting ready to finish their senior year, I mean, it's talking like engagements and, marriages and family and stuff like that. It's a lot different when you're 24 as opposed to an 18-year-old. So playing junior hockey is a really, allowed guys to really grow up, mature, and that's a big part of our culture and our program.
How does a Saskatoon guy become a Canadiens fan to begin with?
That's my old man. Back in the day when the original 6, I mean, it seems like if you were from Canada, it was the Leafs or the Canadiens. And for me, my dad was always, his whole family was all Leaf fans, and I feel like he just wanted to do something different. But he was a Habs fan for a long time. He was a big fan of Jean Beliveau and Guy Lafleur and some of these guys, because he usually only had 2 channels in Canada back in the day. It was French CBC and Canadian, so we were able to watch all the games. But for me, my biggest thing was in 1993. So I'm 10 years old, and the Montreal Canadiens were pretty good that year. They had Patrick Waugh and some guys. But that year, they won like the first round. They were down 2-0 to Quebec, and then they win that series, and then they beat Buffalo. And they just went on this magical run, and it was like the record. I think they won 10 games in overtime. And then they won the Stanley Cup that year. Well, I'm 10 years old. I'm impressionable. Watching some games with my dad and kind of understanding what's going on. Well, then some of these games would go into overtime, double overtime. It's way past my bedtime. My dad would be like, hey, I'll tell Mom it's not going to be a big deal. So I was able to stay up and watch some of those ones. I think there was one in Buffalo, like it was like 3, or it was late into the second overtime. I think I probably went to bed at like 11 o'clock at night when my bedtime was probably like 9 or something. But by then, when I was 10, I was hooked. At that point, you see your team win. And to be honest with you, all of my pro sports teams, when I was at 8, 9, 10 years old, were all really good. You bug me about my Redskins and how bad they've been of recent times, but they won the Super Bowl in 1991. I was 8 years old, so I remember watching that. My Toronto Blue Jays won back-to-back World Series in 92, 93. I remember watching.
Yeah, they beat the Phillies.
Yeah,
that was
that's
cool.
right. Yeah, and actually, as a matter of fact, like everybody's showing, all these sports channels right now. I mean, trying to find content. Sportsnet, which owns the rights to the Blue Jays games, have been airing, past, highlight games. So they literally highlighted the 92 World Series when they beat the Braves, and then the 93 one. They've been showing the games live, like you can watch them and stuff.
I'm sorry I missed it.
Yeah. So, but no, it's like I said, for me, Montreal Canadiens fan, it's 93, and I think that's the big thing for a lot of people is usually you jump from the bandwagon at some point, unless it's ingrained in your head. I do laugh at some of those guys that have kids now on their team. The kids don't cheer for the same teams, and I'm wondering where did the disconnect happen?
Well, exactly, because when I was growing up, when I was the age that you were for 93 and stuff, I was like Mike Singletary. I want winners. So obviously I didn't root for any of the Philadelphia teams when I was real little. I watched none of the regular season of NFL really, but I'm cheering for the Rams in Super Bowl 34. I'm cheering for the Raiders in Super Bowl 37. So obviously, I guess the way that Patrick Waugh was a great young player on that team, and they're playing Gretzky in LA. So I guess the Canadiens, during that 10-game streak, made a good enough impression on you so that you weren't just cheering for Wayne Gretzky in the final.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that was, especially, Western Canada. He played for the Oilers. Everybody was a Wayne Gretzky fan. Everybody had Wayne Gretzky posters in their room. I think I had one at one point. He was just, larger than life, especially those guys that are right now, currently probably in their 40s. They are all Wayne Gretzky fans. And I think, now you actually watch some of the documentaries of what went down with that trade. There's a really good one on ESPN.
Oh yeah, I bought that episode. That was the very first 30 for 30.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. I remember seeing that. Yeah. And it was an eye opener for me too. I mean, the actual, he had some hand in this and really didn't kind of push away when he probably could have. And, those type of things. And of course, his.
You see it with Brady now too. I mean, like it was a matter of just, even after all these years, I know Gretzky wasn't there for 20, but I mean, just the value that he's given to the franchise, and he didn't like hearing the way that the ownership was talking about him, and the owner didn't even want to trade him for like players of value. He just needed money, right? I mean, honestly, it's such a story where I think, I mean, you got to give credit for ESPN like greenlighting that, and credit to like how important Wayne was, both to hockey in Canada, obviously, and how he grew the game. Where we know how big 30 for 30 is today as it continues way past the 30th year of ESPN. But shoot, for them to lead that whole institutional series with a hockey topic, and where hockey obviously isn't the most popular sport in the States, it kind of says something, man.
It does. It really does.
There might have been other factors to it, but still, I mean.
Yep. And that's the biggest thing, I took away from that is you really talk about how hockey has expanded, in specific regions and everywhere else in the lower mainlands and stuff. I mean, even the trickle-down effect currently with, how the Arizona Coyotes went there and all of a sudden you got a young Austin Matthews who's the, number one pick in the draft, comes from Arizona, and so those type of things. And see the growth of hockey in general and how kids in California and all these other areas are starting. I mean, Dallas has we go down to the national tournament last year in Dallas and we're like, holy cow, they have 8 rinks all over. I mean, it's just floored with kids playing, youth hockey here and where there's no snow ever. And so you see that. But I remember, though, I mean, everybody was cheering against the Habs. Everybody was cheering for Wayne Gretzky, even though he's playing for the Kings. And I think a lot of people who were Oilers fans were truly, Wayne Gretzky fans. And I'm sure there was probably some anger that he was traded, but it wasn't until you watched the documentary. They were all over the owner, which they, to this day, I mean, Peter Pocklington, I don't know if he's allowed to be even in the region. I know people are not a big fan of him, and not just for the trade, but just, he was hurting financially with his businesses and his meat packing plants and stuff like that too. That was a big part of it as well. But yeah, it's that's an interesting story. But yeah, no, like I said, everybody wasn't a big fan of me cheering for my Canadiens in '93.
Going back to '93, still, I mean, obviously you probably thought that Patrick Roy, before he did the rest of the stuff in his career, was probably the best goalie ever, even after that season. But another big personality in that series was Barry Melrose, the great mullet coach. Wonder if you take anything from his demeanor and your style, and have you ever considered, I don't know, with respect, maybe especially now, just growing out the flow a little bit?
Well, I tell you, there's some. I think I got a couple pictures. I think I was like 8 years old. I had bleach white blonde hair and then party in the back or whatever. I mean, I think it was almost like a staple for almost everybody.
Party all over. It's not.
Yeah, exactly.
No business, man.
Yeah, but no, I mean, even for Barry Melrose, geez, there's a lot of connections. He's from Saskatchewan. He married a gal from Weyburn, and so he was very familiar. I think he's like, when we won it in 2013, he posted like, hey, congrats to Minot State. I love going down to the state fair, and he remembered doing that, back in the day. But yeah, there's something about style, and either it was him or Don Cherry with their suits. Pretty crazy how those guys would bring their style for sure.
So obviously a great summer for you as a young kid that year. But why couldn't John LeClair and Eric Desjardins win a Stanley Cup with the Flyers when they could have so much fun with the Canadiens? What's their problem?
Oh, man, you're absolutely right. Jeez, that was crazy. What was that, the Legion of Doom line?
Yeah, like the Lindros era of the 90s.
Oh, man. It was, I'm kind of remember, did they have Roman Cechmanek as the goalie?
Roman Cechmanek was a Vezina finalist. He had 10 shutouts in one season, but he was freaking insane.
Yeah. That was because they lost they lost to, was it the Flyers?
They kept losing to the Senators when the Senators were really coming up, leading into like the early part of the 2000s. Like Patrick Lalime. Yeah. The Flyers, like, they lost in like 5 games, and Lalime probably only gave up. I mean, you probably count on one hand how many goals he gave up in that series. He was ridiculous. And then they called him in the second round as well, right before I think they advanced to losing to Tampa. And I actually read Jeremy Roenick loved that team of the Flyers. He said in his book he thought that whoever was going to win that Tampa series was definitely, I mean, hindsight, they thought they were going to win the Cup. They were going to beat the Flames that year. But obviously it's not going to happen because it's in the orange and black. So,
well, and the
what are you gonna
interesting
do?
dynamic about that whole thing is I would love to see more. I think there's a couple of stories on it I've read. Was the overall valuation of that Eric Lindros trade, because I'll tell you that trade to Quebec, what Quebec then turned into the Avalanche, was the reason why the Avalanche was so good. I mean,
Can you imagine moving your franchise and being able to win the championship first year? I know the Knights almost did it, but that was in Las Vegas, and obviously there had to been some backlash with Quebec going through, and who knows how much. I don't know. I'm not familiar with how well Colorado was embracing hockey when they moved. Obviously good enough to move, but still, I mean, that's pretty nice. So
it was. Well, and you think about like Peter Forsberg was a part of that deal. He was a huge part of the Avalanche. And just those dynamics that like I think there was like 2 draft picks, and I forget who they turned out to be. I think one of them might have been Adam Foote, or was a big defenseman, and so like I love to see the dynamic on how that. I remember it was an absolute when they made that trade. I think it was a draft day trade, and it was like 7 or 8 pieces.
Forsberg was in his Flyers jersey, and then he got traded. Yeah.
So I mean, it was pretty crazy to see how that all shook out, but. I love that stuff, man. I love when especially in the NFL or basketball or hockey or baseball specifically, like the trade trees and like what happened, and especially in baseball because everything's through prospects. I remember reading a story like Roy Halladay was my favorite all-time pitcher. Played for your Phillies there and my Blue Jays, and he played in all those bad years where he had like lowest run support. Ironically enough, I actually got to see his last ever game in the Skydome. In Toronto. I was actually there for a career fair when I was a student back in 2008, I think, or 2009. Got traded to the Phillies that year, but just being able to he gets traded to the Phillies, right? And then what did the Jays get in return? And it was like whatever number of prospects. Well, one blew out his arm and never made it. One was like Eric Grayback or something like that.
Kyle Drabek didn't really measure up. I remember the Phillies gave away Carlos Carrasco to the Indians for Cliff Lee, and you always kind of wonder like if any of these prospects will hit, and just those teams are such in a terrible position of no leverage when things like that happen. But I wanted to just like put a bow quick on just like that '90s Cup win, something. Another polarizing topic, obviously, if you're talking about Colorado winning, was Patrick Roy leaving Montreal for that. As you were watching that, obviously you were really young, and even just looking back as you were more familiar with the game, do you think there was any chance at saving him staying with Montreal, or were you pretty much just not surprised at all that it kind of went down that way, given all the personalities involved?
Oh man, I that as a Habs fan, that was one of the worst things ever, and I remember watching the game. I think I didn't watch it from start to finish, but I think at some point I was flipping the channels, I was watching the game, and then they were getting blown out to flip it back to find out that he's still in goal when he was playing the Red Wings. And I remember that, there was issues going on in the locker room. I mean, Patrick Roy was the boss, and the coach, power struggle and all that, blah, 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 blah. Is that, I remember he finally gets pulled at like the 11th goal or whatever it was. And back in the day, you watched the Montreal Canadiens and you watched like the behind the glass, right? There behind the bench, there was no glass. The owner sat right behind you. You could touch him. That was such a weird dynamic there in the old Montreal form, is that he gets off, gets his stuff, and then he walks by the coach over to the owner who's sitting there and says,
it's the other way of the tunnel, right?
Yeah. He's like going. He's like, trade me
out of his way.
Yeah, I'm not playing again or whatever. And you're sitting there thinking, like, honestly, like, is this honestly like? Has it got to that point where your number one player, and yes, there is some probably ego is so big, but he has earned it. I mean, in some respects. I mean, he won a cup in '86, and then lost in the '89 cup to the Flames, and then won it again in '93. He's in his prime, absolute prime right now.
Stud.
Absolute stud. Like, you can't, he's French Canadian, which of course in Montreal is everything. Is that you can't tell me that this Mario Tremblay, who's the coach, who I hated anyways, is like, he's not going to be there anyway. Like, really, owner, step in, find out what's the deal here. And then if it is the coach's issue, then let's get rid of him, like. That's of course. Then he wins 2 more cups with the Avalanche, and he's like the Conn Smythe, and it's like, and goaltenders are literally like, I mean, it's like a quarterback, right? If you have it's a position that they take care of themselves, can be elite for 12 to 13 years. And it's just like a quarterback. I mean, you could be transcended your program forever. It's one position you never have to worry about. And all of a sudden, we're
Just
trading.
wake up in the morning, go to the game, watch him, chill out. You know,
But,
you might have to pay him the farm eventually, but I mean, for God's sake, like even at that point, oh well.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing, moving ahead to the 2000s, was were you surprised that the Canadiens, as the 1 seed, lost to the Flyers in 08? Because I can hold that against you, but I sure was surprised. The playoff scheduling was terrible. I remember they won an overtime Game 7 in Washington, and they were in Montreal the next night, and they lost that game. But then it goes 5. That was a freaking shocker.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh geez. The Canadiens are the exact opposite of what is supposed to go to plan. Like that was the year that we had aspirations. I'm trying to think if they had Alexei Kovalev on that team, didn't they? Was it Jose Theodore in goal? I can't remember if he was still in goal for them at that time. But they had like Andre Kostitsyn, who was really good.
That was the year they moved to Halak, and then Halak knocked out the Caps a couple years later, I believe.
Okay, yeah. So, but you backtrack from like 90, I think it was like 96, 97, they were the 8 seed, and they upset the Bruins. And I think they did it again in like 90, 99 or something like that. So like there were times where they shouldn't have been, expected to do anything, and then they're winning. And then all of a sudden, now they're expected their first, number 1 seed, and they're like, all right, here we're going. And then they, crap it out. And that was the thing. It was like, what is it, 2011? That year they got to the conference final, too. And they had that controversy with, Carey Price and Halak in that era. It's just, my halves have just been, in recent times, like I said, I'm trying to compare it maybe like the Cowboys. I mean, I don't know, they could just crush your hopes and just have no, and then even now, I mean, you talk about where they've been and where they have been in the last couple of years and how they've had some issues about making some decisions. Like they traded Sergachev, who was a stud defenseman, who was a prospect, to the Tampa Bay Lightning to get Drouin.
Do you think there's ever been, like, over the years, a hindrance to, like, obviously it's easy to relate to the fans with all the French-Canadian players, coaches, and front office members. Has that ever hurt the Canadiens in the long run? I know their first-round pick was that Cole Caulfield, which I would have liked to see the Flyers take, but he's another guy that seems a little bit smaller anyway. I mean, has that gotten into the Canadiens' heads too much sometimes?
It is. Absolutely it is. And it's not only, the thing that's from a player standpoint, it's personnel standpoint too. And I get it. In that market, you need to have somebody who's bilingual, obviously speaking, because you're dealing with media that have that types. Although Montreal is definitely more English in that province. Montreal is kind of like the English part of what goes on there. Quebec City is more of like the true French. If you want a quick history lesson, there was 1995. There was the Quebec referendum where they tried to vote to leave Canada. And the early polls came from eastern Quebec, where the yes side was winning until the polls closed in Montreal, and then the English-speaking voted to stay in Canada, which is, it was crazy to see that. So Montreal, you already have a high number of English-speaking Canadians living in there. I mean, it's really only, I think, 2 hours from Ottawa, which is the capital. They cross over the Rideau River. But anyways, it's really, I get it. It sells tickets, and there's a level of regional opportunities that are really going to force that to exposure. But it doesn't have to be, the whole recipe. I remember we had one year that was controversy, had Brian Giunta as the captain, and he was the captain.
Yeah.
He's American, right? But I think they got to the conference finals that one year. He was the captain.
Yeah, that was when Camilleri took off.
Yeah,
you guys played the Flyers, yeah.
Yeah, and so I kind of was, in terms of that stuff, I'm like, it doesn't have to be, everything that goes with it. And I just, I like you said, I think the Drouin trade was more about, let's get a, French, Canadian opportunity to play another, new spark, but it's going to be in Montreal, as opposed to Sergachev, who is going to be probably one of the best young defensemen probably for the next decade. And he's a defenseman that you realize you win Stanley Cups with. Like, you think about the Blues when they won the Stanley Cup, you think of all the hype with some of the kids they had, and of course Binnington playing so well. But like Jay Bouwmeester is does his job, never turns the puck over, never makes mistakes in the D zone. The puck's out on the tape, out of the zone on a regular basis. It's not flashy. He doesn't walk in and
keep it simple, stupid.
Yes, absolutely. It's simple. You do your job, and you win Stanley Cups that way. And I think that's the mindset that I feel like is concerning with my Canadiens, is that they're going in this spiral. The other side of the thing about hockey, which I think is different from other sports, is that I don't believe in resets that really work. A reset, like, hey, we're just going to take one off year here, make a couple little trades, and we're going to go for it next year. No, in hockey, you basically have to do a full-scale, blow it up, rebuild, start from scratch. Because you can't continually get into this spiral where you think you're going to be next year, and then what's the worst thing happens? You keep finishing. Like last year, they were the first team out of the
picking
playoffs.
10th now, or whatever.
Yeah, you're right. You're picking in the teens when you think you're going to make it, and so yeah.
I was actually going to try to get you out of the Canadiens talk on a sun will come up tomorrow high note here, and you kind of started getting into it. There is, first of all, what would be your first line of all-time Canadiens, and other than bringing those guys back to play today, what are the answers for the Habs to get back into being a playoff contender, given, right now, I mean, Boston might be a little on the older side soon, but then those guys in Tampa, they don't seem to be going away in that division. And even if Toronto figures it out with their young guys that they can actually perform on the big stage, I mean, watch out, man.
No,
I know that boy, that sounds like it's like starting positive, and then the rest of it is brutal.
Oh, yeah.
So go right ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, for me, if you pick my all-time, say, like players that have played in Montreal Canadiens jersey, I mean, number one was Saku Koivu. I was a big fan of him. Just the way he was a style, he was a leader, and then obviously, just the whole story of him, beating cancer and being able to play and all those type of things. He was definitely one of my all-time favorite Canadiens player. And then of course I go back to '93. I was a big fan of Stéphane Richer or Vincent Dafous. I got a little bit of French because I watched a lot of those games. But,
Stéphane Richer scored a goal in the Seinfeld episode where Putty painted his face. When George tries to tell his zookeeper girlfriend that he loves her, and then you hear it on the radio, and Putty's freaking out, like, Devil's goal, Stéphane Richer, just inside the blue line.
Absolutely.
So he's on your list.
Buddy. Oh yeah, the Devils. No, those are big. I mean, I'm still to this day, Eric Desjardins, who scored those. I think game 2 or game 3 Kings, he scored the game tying goal, and then he beat Kelly Rudy for the game overtime. And I remember the call. It was like Desjardins.
Love Desjardins.
Yeah, like that. In terms of that, Patrick Waugh, obviously, from a goaltending standpoint. Although I'm a huge Carey Price fan. I just feel bad. I'm at to tell you the truth. As we evolve into what you're trying to answer my question about going farther, is that I do think the time is now for the Montreal Canadiens to trade Carey Price. I am, like I said, I feel like the Habs are in quicksand right now, and how much Carey Price had struggled at the beginning of the year, was on fire, like the last half, like it was crazy. Like when I'm watching my own hockey, I don't get to see a whole lot of my Montreal Canadiens games, unless it's, a weird Tuesday night where, I put my little one to bed and, I'm like, oh, they're playing a late game with, the Kings or, Anaheim, and I can watch it, or, on the NHL network or or watch it on my phone. But he would caught fire. And I think that its time is now, because let's say he's got, 3-4 years of really good hockey left in him, which you never know for a goaltender, but it's just say a reasonably that would be something that would be, I feel like now you probably get legitimate pieces for it. So you try to think of who would be, a trading partner, a dance partner, like the Winnipeg Jets. Potentially, like they got Connor Hellebuck, but they're like, man, we've always thought like they're that one extra, goaltender, or even in Western Canada, either the Flames and the Oilers have been spinning around with goaltenders and having some issues with it, or the Arizona Coyotes, like, hey, maybe they're a team that's like, okay, we're ready to take that next step with our young guys, but now we have an elite goaltender that we can rely on. So I've had numerous conversations with my dad and some of my Habs fans. The McFalls, Larry and Brandon are both big Habs fans, so I certainly I see Brandon quite a bit at the rink, so we'll always be talking about.
That's going to be a topic for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we'll talk about it. And I think, and I joked with him. I thought I have to ask him, but I swear, one of these times we were passing each other, and I think he said, maybe Wade, you're right about this whole Carey Price thing, and I think it's just something that I feel like you have to blow it up and start all over again, because I just don't think that you're in a spot. I mean, I'm a huge Shea Weber fan. I mean, I played against him in my 18-year-old year. That year that we won the league, we ended up playing against his Sycamoose Eagles in the Western Canadian Championships. But he was 16 years old at the time, and I'm a huge fan of him. But I mean, he's got an ugly contract. It's like,
yeah. The Flyers gave him that contract. Nashville kept it, and they trade the rock star PK. But I mean, we can go on and on and on for sure, and especially maybe a good point for getting rid of Carey Price now is that the Canadiens could just look out west a little bit, and you got Josh Bykowski and Holden Kurtz there waiting in the wings looking for a job.
Absolutely.
You got not one but two competitors.
As a matter of fact, I mean, I tell you, I know Holden Kurtz had a number of opportunities to. As soon as the season was over, they were asking him, how can you flip your classes around, and would you be willing to try the pro stuff? Mm-hmm. It was pretty crazy on how that all tried. Yeah, goaltending position in the pros, even in the minor leagues, is very well taken care of, because you are like 2 growing poles away from
they expect you to get groomed up a little bit.
Because, I mean, geez, you talk about the whole, the David Ayers, story of the emergency backup. Well, the Carolina Hurricanes, in that situation, their goalies go down. Well, then what happens? Their AHL guys move up, East Coast guys. So the bottom and like your 4th level down, scrubs that are making money in pros could be like $30,000. But if you're a goalie, you could be making over 6 figures, because again, you're 2 growing poles away or an injury away from going right up to the 2nd level. And that's a big thing. So like I said, in terms of my Habs, I feel like its time is now, and as a true Habs fan, it's not going to stop me from not watching my Habs. I'm going to be, even if they're rebuilding, I'll be excited to see them, drafting some young guys and seeing them go through this. And God knows in Montreal, like everything is hockey there. It's not going to change anything.
We'll get a little closer to home for me, and maybe even still closer to home for you here, is that another team trying to build up is your Washington Redskins. Somehow you land on rooting for them, and just coming out of this offseason, it's a great coaching hire for them. Ron Rivera is a strong personality. He'll probably put his stamp on the franchise right away. Do you think he's a great guy to have? Personally, I think that, the Redskins on their side might be fortunate to have him the way things have gone. Or do you feel like Dan Snyder's going to keep getting in the way?
That's the thing that kills everything. I mean, I hate it. I hate how he's involved in everything. And I mean, I even heard last year, they were saying that he was the one that, wanted Dwayne Haskins and was like actually in the control room. And it almost reminded me of that, what's that movie with Kevin Costner, Draft Day, where the owner's like, you're a dead man and all that stuff. Like, I feel like that's kind of.
As improbable as that ending was, we won't give away that great movie ending. No. Yeah, that might be happening in Washington, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it just feel like he's, although now with Ron Rivera now in charge, I'm very, I guess I've been reading and watching a lot. Like, obviously I'm connected to all their social media and stuff, but just watching on ESPN and how they're conducting themselves, I feel like Ron Rivera only came to the Redskins with the notion that I'm the boss. Okay?
And I'm getting Chase Young number 2 overall.
You're not vetoing anything. You're not involved, and I'm the boss. I'm making the culture. We're going to have personnel in here, but I'm the one making the decisions, because I feel like that's just who he is as a personality. Like, Ron's a very, like, he's a go type of guy, but he commands respect. So I am very optimistic that things are going to be going in an upward trend for the Redskins. And I feel like they have, from an offensive standpoint, have made some blunders in the past. And I feel like if they make the sound decisions, like, for instance, they're in a great spot right now. They're going to pick, Chase Young. I hope they do. Right. He's an elite pass rusher. A perfect world, we're talking like someone trades up, like 1 or 2 spots, and they still get him at 5, but yet, because if you talk about, the whole, what was that, RG3 trade and on, like that, set us back, and, the blunders that we've made, and like they had,
it's funny. Well, it's funny that you mentioned like the Schneider forcing the quarterback card on Haskins because maybe it shows a stride for Jerry Jones out in Dallas, elsewhere in the NFC East. I always remember maybe he's finally so far removed from the '90s and all of that, where he actually let his family that runs the rest of the organization take Johnny Manziel's card out of his hand, and they drafted Zach Martin, who's been a stud for as soon as he got into the league. And maybe even more so now that unfortunately Travis Frederick had to retire for Guillain-Barré syndrome, if I'm saying that hopefully correctly, and for the interior of that offensive line. So I think that's a pretty good parallel. But at the same time, I mean, obviously you love the Redskins and stuff, and they have plenty of fans. I mean, I went to college, UMD, 10 miles outside of DC. All my roommates root them. They have the fans. How do fans stick with teams that, obviously – they have to cheer for their owners selling the team, or their owners criticize all the time, but you still love the logo?
Yeah, and I do know that there is some, you watch the days of when they were a powerhouse, especially when Joe Gibbs was, running the helm. And you know what? I tell you, part of the reason why, I was a big fan of the Skins in '91 when they won there. But when I came to Minot State in 2004, you don't get a whole lot of the analytics side or the analysts. You don't get a whole lot of color of NFL. You get the like highlights in the games and stuff, but you don't get ESPN. So when I came down here and you're like, holy cow, like just being able to get all the analysts of what's going on for, my Redskins. And then of course they win the division in 2004. And so then I was really, really kind of hooked.
Oh, no, somebody else won the division in 2004.
Did they?
Eagles went to the Super Bowl in 2004.
Oh, okay, well then, they won.
Might have been like 05 or something. I don't know.
Maybe it was. Maybe that's what it was. I do remember too. They won the division in '09. They had to win like 5 or 6 in a row to win the division.
Same with the RG3 year. They were 3-6 and won 7 straight in 2012 to win.
Yeah, I think it was 2009. They had Brad Johnson. I remember going to a game in Minnesota with my buddies, and I was the only one in the whole section wearing a Redskins jersey in the old. What do you call it? The old dome there that they had with the white
Metrodome.
Yeah, and so, but no, it's an interesting thing. But I do know that, they last year, I think it was at FedEx Field, like the top upper deck, like they are shutting, like they're tenting it off because the fans aren't coming, and DC is turning into like what they call like a desk, like almost like the Chargers, where like the visiting team has more fans almost.
Oh yeah, so, big time. So, you were talking about in the early 90s, you were coming out watching the Habs and the Redskins winning and stuff like that. DC, you haven't had some championship experience as a fan for a little while, unfortunately. And DC was not only starved for a championship, but they were completely snake-bitten the way that the Capitals and the Nationals, probably through like the early 2010s, were just getting there after awesome seasons and just like flaming out. And both of those teams have been fortunate enough to finally get over the hump in just awesome fashion. Those were both great championships to watch develop in those playoff runs. But now that you've been a fan for all your life and a much longer time, you won't be a wide-eyed little kid bandwagoned or whatever. What would it mean if the Redskins somehow, some way, found a way to win the Super Bowl here in the Rivera era?
That'd be. I'll just hold my breath, I guess. But it would certainly be.
Are you?
Cool.
Yeah.
Man, the thing about the Redskins, I think the last number of years is that they've always been about, say, 6-6, going into the last whatever games there are. They either go and win the division 10-6, or they'll go they're always in the hunt.
It's that middle 4 games. It's like the baseball analogy where everybody wins a third and loses a third, and what do you do with the rest of it?
Especially
in the division.
Yep. Everybody doesn't realize that when Alex Smith before he went down, they were 7-3. Like they were.
Yeah, they were solid. They were legit.
Absolutely. Yeah, they were. Our optimistic. We have probably the all-time one of the best game managers ever, which is fine. I don't mind that. Hey, as long as you're not turning the ball over, on a constant basis, and that's a big thing.
Doing what everybody else does.
Yeah. It's make the throws you have to do, and you always historically had a pretty good run game, and blah 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 blah. Well, I tell you, that'd be pretty cool. Like I said, I hold my breath, but I feel like the parameters are in place to be very successful. The problem is you look at where the rest of the division is, and I don't want to toot your own horn, but I tell you, the Eagles are going to be very good. I feel like they'd give Wentz a couple weapons.
Yeah, they need another second running back, a wide receiver, and some linebackers. We have some street guys on linebacker right now, but
I think you guys are a good split. Especially when you watch if you watch the NFL Network and guys that are like true guys, that are dissecting, what Wentz does, and I think it was like on ESPN, Orlovsky did a really good job of like understanding, this is where like this is a drop right here. He showed like an actual play, like they're playing somebody, and it was like whatever week 15, and you're looking at this play, and you're going to thinking that this is absolutely just a minor play. It's in the third quarter, it's 3rd and 6, and he throws it to the flat, and the guy drops the ball or whatever, and it's like, what happens 2 plays later? They go down the field and they beat us or whatever. It's like those types of things that is like, if that guy catches the ball like he should, Wentz throws it to the right spot, he gets it out, right call, like the game changes and does something different, right? So I just think that I think the Cowboys are, I don't know if they'll ever win like the Super Bowl. They've got such good talent there. I mean, they're always good. I mean, they always have my Redskins number. I feel like you give the Giants a couple of years here to be good. That division in the next, say 2 to 3 years is going to be so good. And that's why I feel like the Chase Young pick is going to be really good, because you're going to have Dak Prescott, who is a really good quarterback. You have Wentz, who's a really good quarterback. I think the early take on Jones is he has a lot of really good potential.
But you can rattle him maybe, just like Eli.
You're going to need a pass rusher. You need to get guys to get after these guys that are such good quarterbacks. And so I feel like, if Chase Young is the real deal, it's either going to be help him be elite, which is what we want, or whatever other team that has a really good elite pass rusher is going to open up other guys on the line to be able to make plays. But who knows? We'll see.
Got you that. Well, Wade, all things considered, I'll wish you well with the Minot State hockey team. And to be honest, none of your pro team interests, but I mean, what are you going to do, man?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, man. The thing is, it's just recruiting and talking to my guys. I'm very optimistic, and as a Canadian living in the United States here, that America's going to get this figured out one way or another. I just feel like we're too smart of a nation that there are things that are going to happen. It's either going to be a vaccine that's going to be coming through here, or the big thing news is that getting that antibody test, which is going to be really cool, because hey, we all we had a bad cold rip through our family in January, and I mean my wife had to miss a couple of days of school, and my hockey team, I mean, only one guy truly got tested for the flu, and he had it. The rest of the guys missed practice. I mean, who knows? I mean, we really don't know. I mean, it feels like everybody jokes about it, like, man, in January, February, we have already had it. So it'd be kind of cool to get that, stuff done, because then hey, if I did have it, or the case may be. But like I said, I'm optimistic. We're gonna get this all figured out. We're gonna have hockey in the fall, and like I said, it feels like my recruits are thinking the same thing. Hey, I'm just gonna ride this out. We're move to the summer, and then everything's gonna open up, and then we're gonna be hopefully, like you said, the new normal, in the fall.
Absolutely. Everybody's doing their best. Thanks, Wade, and stay well, bud.
You bet. Thanks, Ben.